How about applications in creativity? Yeah, well, many people may not know that Mr. James Cameron actually dreamt a very powerful dream when he was going through a tough time in his life. I guess he just had a very tough dealing with one of the movies he was making, a smaller movie. And he saw this chrome skeleton kind of emerging from a fire, if I understand correctly, sort of getting up and kind of walking out of the fire. And he said that image really struck him enough that he wrote a bit of a script around it and ended up not just becoming the incredible Terminator movie, which I guess many people have heard of, but also launching his entire career. So in a way, creative insight, but also a whole career path guidance that really brought us great films. And I believe he's also incorporated or used dreams to inspire other movies, possibly even the big Avatar, which I met him a couple times. I had the great privilege, and he said that Avatar was much like a lucid dream, and I sort of got that impression watching it too. So, seems to be not just Inception, but the whole idea is coming across in the mainstream culture more these days. The Vanilla Sky, The Matrix, it's definitely getting out there. So that's pretty interesting. Just can we control 100% of the dream? I just got a question coming through. Well, I'd say if you can develop it, lucidity, even just kind of like dream recall. I'm kind of flexing my arm here, is a little bit like a mental muscle. And if you think of it, at the start, you might not have full-blown consciousness or full-blown lucidity or full-blown awareness in the dream. But if you practice, if you learn some techniques, if you just, experiment, you actually may get more control. And as I mentioned before, you may not always want to change the dream or, kill the bad guy or do something to affect the outer scenario. You might just change your response, or you might just enjoy a richer awareness or explore some other perceptions, smell a flower. So you gain more and more awareness. But at some points, and a few dreamers have reported full-blown, let's say close to 100% control, yeah. Or at least, let's say full-blown 100% awareness. So you can guide it and produce it pretty much in real time. So other creative applications, Mr. McCartney actually dreamt the idea for Yesterday, and he said, scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love your legs. Lots of people later, I guess, sort of said, it's a great melody, Paul, why don't you develop it? And it took him about a month to own it, and finally he said, scrambled eggs. Well, it's funny, it gets a laugh, but I don't think that's the title. And eventually he ended up with a really great title, because he dreamt the title also about a month later when in Portugal. And he dreamt the title you all know, Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. And I don't believe it was a lucid dream, but I will just make the point that as we're yearning for something, as we're kind of having a strong intention, or even just working on a problem as we go to sleep, it's quite possible, and actually it happens all the time, that we start dreaming solutions to the problem. In this case, probably a great songwriter was looking for the next big hit, and bingo. It sort of surfed through the internet, and he landed on the right inner website and got, I guess, the song Yesterday. And I believe he also used the dream inspiration from meeting his mother Mary, which he didn't know the lyrics for that. But I wake up to the sound of music, Mother Mary next to me. I believe he also woke up from a dream. So two of his biggest hits and the Beatles' greatest hits inspired by dreams. So creative applications are huge. Painters sometimes go in their lucid dreams, look on the studio walls for new ideas. And I actually use it for musical inspiration. If people are inspired, don't go now because the webcast has lots of great info. But afterwards, you can check out Polymer's song on YouTube. I just released a new song. The dreams have inspired me to share more publicly, and maybe we'll give you a little link later. So, yeah, you can apply it to creative inspiration. Maybe if you're lucky like McCartney, you might even make a little bit of money or even millions. So, in whatever area your creativity, for example, it might be problem solving. I understand that we have maybe even Forbes magazine or Wall Street Journal on the conference tonight. Actually, in business, it can be very practical. Most people don't know, but PageRank comes from the name Larry Page, which is one of the key elements of the Google search algorithm. And I know that they change their algorithm quite often. But originally, it was Larry Page, I guess one of the two founders, who dreamt sort of a certain setup and how a ranking system was happening, sort of saw an image again and realized, wow, this would be a great way to sort of make a more accurate search engine than some of the ones that were existing back in the early days. And that's what he did, and the Google that we all know is the result. And obviously it's changed since then, but the seed came in a very powerful dream that obviously changed many millions of lives. So a couple examples from business. Another gentleman who worked on an assembly line, let's say an engineer, I think, or maybe a factory worker, ended up dreaming just a simple thing to change the assembly line. And he sort of told his coworkers and boss and asked some of the, I guess, physicists or engineers, does this make like sense to you to try this process a new way? and ended up, they said, sounds interesting, we can try it. And they ended up saving, I think, $3.2 million a year just for that one dreamt answer. So it starts to be pretty practical when it's applied to, I guess, solving problems. And Nobel Prizes have been won. Mendeleev dreamt the table of elements and how it was laid out. And I believe Otto Liawi dreamt the idea for chemical mediation of nerve impulses, sort of how nerves fire their signals. He was dreaming about frogs' legs, and the experiment won him a Nobel Prize. And lots of other great examples of big creative dreamers. So just checking out where we're at in time. We have time for a few more. How about seeding events? I'll give you an example from, I guess, my own life here. Let's see. Actually, I'll give you an example from one of the clients who's taken a teleclass, because I offer teleclasses all about dreams and lucid living. And her whole interest, I guess, her incubation, her intention was she wanted to have, a really powerful relationship. She was successful in business, and her health was great, etc. But she felt she wasn't really fulfilled on the romantic front in a really important place for her. And so that's the intention she kind of set for the whole class. And she didn't even have too good dream recall, which is usually actually a pretty important precursor to lucidity. Okay, we're going to talk about lucky dreamers in a sec, but I'll finish my story. So she said, I don't know, but that's my intention. She was pretty clear, and she worked through a little bit of emotional, and I can't share too much of her personal process because I'm kind of under privacy with the dream groups that we lead. But she said I could sort of share publicly that she had a powerful dream with roses. Just a simple image, 2 roses or 3 roses kind of right in front of her, some beautiful red roses. And everybody in the dream group thought that bode pretty well in week 2 of 10 weeks. And she didn't have too much recall. She worked through, I think, a few emotional scenarios in the next weeks, but didn't have too much action until all of a sudden in week 10, the last week, I guess this is how she waits till the last minute. Anybody else there ever done procrastination? So she's a dream procrastinator. But on the last week, as she was on the teleclass, I guess sitting in front of her computer in her office, out of nowhere, all of a sudden a red rose appeared on her desk, and she started laughing, and we didn't know what was happening. And then another red rose, she told us she had 3 red roses, or I think they were starting to pile up more than 3. And we all laughed a bit when she told us, I think I found my relationship. It turned out somebody very close to her in the office that she never even dreamt of being romantic with was bringing her roses, and she said that it turned into a really beautiful relationship. So even just an intention, a clear intention, kind of like for people who've seen the law of attraction popularized by, I guess, the movie The Secret, can be very powerful before dreams or before sleep. You actually kind of send it as a seed into the subconscious if you kind of think of something or work on a problem just before sleep. And that seed has a little bit more traction or has a little bit more power to kind of grow into a whole event in our lives when we do it just before sleep, because we're kind of already in a deeper, subtle state. So seeding events, and if you're lucky enough to have a full-blown lucid dream, you can actually put your intention forth right in the dream, I want to be a millionaire, or the more specific you can be, the better. So I'm not going to get into the law of attraction, but bringing about events in our life. I'll give you an example of communication, another one for relationship benefits here. Somebody wants me to talk about lucky dreamers. So are the examples I'm sharing all lucky, or let's say supernatural, or very sensational rare cases? And my honest experience says no, it's fairly common once people kind of develop some of the skills, and even just for people who start recalling dreams more, start finding very, very powerful insights about their life, creative applications, insights. I can tell you, I told you before, I had my life path vision. Here's another example, and this is, not uncommon for partners who are very close and sleep together, or family members. In this case, it was a close friend of mine, also a good lucid dreamer, so right out of the Inception movie. And we hadn't seen each other for a few years, but he was working away on some great projects with, I guess, a mutual friend of ours. You might know from the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, for people who have seen that. It was Bill Tiller, and he was working on some projects with Bill, and I didn't know anything about it. But all of a sudden, one morning I woke up with a clear dream. He was talking to me and saying that Bill would be presenting in Montreal very shortly. Maybe I ended up on the Craigslist, sorry for the bad pun, of the internet. And I got his announcement that, because I hadn't seen any waking announcements in waking life, but in the dream he told me he would be presenting. So I've seen stranger things, and it's actually not uncommon that I kind of get inside info. I phoned him up as I woke up, or a little bit after waking up. I phoned him up and said, hey, Is it possible that Bill might be coming to speak in Montreal? Because I'd love to see him. And he was glad to hear from me because it's been a few years. And he said, I don't know how you tuned into it, but I guess so, because he's going to be there next week. And kind of to make a long story short, I was able to come to a very small private presentation with about 24 people that wasn't really announced. And then I actually had the great fortune to have lunch with the workshop host and with Bill, and also be invited for a presentation later. So interesting benefits resulted just kind of from listening to that inner channel of info, and maybe my friend incepted some interesting ideas to sort of help along with me being able to share my work a little more. That's what I like to believe. So we've got some more questions coming here. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. If you're okay with it, so I'll give a few more examples, maybe 5 more minutes, and then we'll hop into some of your great questions. But thanks. Keep up all the enthusiasm. Let's see. How about healing, grieving? Here's another inception kind of like, and this is actually fairly common. People often have dreams of the deceased, or what's called visitations. Dreams where, however you want to interpret it, but let's say someone who's passed on from this world comes to them in dreams. And in this case, it was actually the husband of our next door neighbor, who I wasn't super close with, but someone I knew, came to me and said kind of along the lines of, my wife, since my kind of untimely death, is really upset, grieving, and could you sort of have a couple words with her and maybe even mention to her that I came on your dream? And I wasn't quite as involved with that, but I got the gist of it. He wanted me to communicate that he's okay, and life does continue. So what do we do? Do we act on the dreams? And I usually encourage people, if it's not going to make you lose a job or lose lots of money, hey, why not act on the dream? You don't really have anything to lose, maybe a little bit of reputation. You might not share it at the board meeting. But in this case, it was a neighbor, and I shared with her, and she was very surprised. And something I shared from the dream was extremely specific to her husband, and that I couldn't have ever known about. And she, I think, started crying, and it was really beautiful and touching. And she said, oh my gosh, I get shivers right as I remember it right now. She says, I guess he really did communicate with you. And it's pretty touching. It's a beautiful moment. Take a breath. And so somehow, I guess, the dead can even communicate with the living, and it can help us with our personal relationships, grieving, healing, physical healing. Lots of other applications I could get into. If we have time during the Q&A, maybe I'll give you a few. But certainly you can always visit the website at dreams.ca. There's lots of great applications on there, and lots of ideas for what you can try in dreams and see what the benefits are. So if we don't get to them all today, you can sort of surf around at your leisure. But I will mention, for some of the people here who might want to explore, I guess, the spiritual benefits, a little bit of dreams. One of the students of the teleclasses that I lead was starting to have some success with pretty good recall and getting clear by the end of the class. And he liked one of the suggestions that I had about exploring his dream body with his hands. In other words, you can kind of pass your hands through things in dreams. Not all objects are solid. So I had mentioned maybe that would be an interesting experiment. He latched on to that. And fortunate enough, I guess he had a powerful lucid dream. He saw one of his co-workers who had already gone back to Germany. And he said, just seeing my friend Hardy from work, I realized I was dreaming, and I guess he kind of checked his hands. Oh, and maybe his hands were wavy. But he quickly remembered, before he kind of got too excited to wake up, oh wow, I'm dreaming now. He said, oh yeah, I wanted to try the experiment. So he started to explore his body, and he said,